talk about cooking methods and ways to enjoy the experience. So please give a warm welcome to our longtime Toastmaster and friend, JohnR.
What is your earliest memory of food? Something to think on. Mine is my grandfather reaching his big bare arms around me and helping me grasp a cast iron skillet, shake it just right, and flip pancakes and eggs. I was probably 4 years old, standing on a stool in front of him on the stove, and he's teaching me how to flip eggs and flip pancakes on a cast iron skillet. It's the same skillet I use every morning now to cook my breakfast. The ability to enjoy food, the ability to cook food, the ability to create these amazing dishes or simple dishes, just stuff to sustain you, I think is a valuable common factor among every single person in the world. Now, whether you don't cook at all and you order out food or just do whatever prep you do to consume it, you still eat it. You still hopefully enjoy it. If you are a gourmet chef like Chuck here, you go and really try to delve into the deep, fine-tuned elements of food to get it to just right. I was lucky enough to work as a prep chef for a gourmet cook when I was 14 years old. I was working construction during the day and there at night and trying to make as much money as possible that summer. And I learned so many different weird little techniques because Sherry, my boss at the time, was an improvisational cook. There we go. Let me say that 10 times fast. She would just randomly grab ingredients, and she had a really fine taste for food, and she'd throw them together. So her dishes were never the exact same, ever. And she just would make these creations happen. And I got to see this as I was frantically trying to keep up with her because she used a lot of dishes to create these random things as I'm trying to cook, wash dishes at the same time and prep. Seeing these elements together and through this hellacious job, I'm really appreciative that I did it in the current time, because now I can have the ability to throw together almost any type of meal with almost any type of ingredients. If you open the fridge and there's 4 different things, you use those 4 different things, you find a way. And finding out what matches with what, I think is a really important tool that you can do. So I would encourage you, if you have, for yourself, if you haven't challenged yourself cooking wise, just grab 4 random ingredients and see what you can create. If you have kids or grandkids, that's a very fun exercise that you can do with them. One of my great bonding experiences with my grandmother was learning how to cook with her. And she raised 6 kids on her own, very, very low budget, trying her best to keep these kids fed. And then once she had the kids all move out of the house, she finally got to learn how to cook really good food in a good manner and having fun with creating little tiny changes to certain dishes. She was the type where she would find a recipe, make that recipe 2 or 3 times, and then she would modify it. And she has a cookbook that I still use today with all of her cursive, handwritten, awesome recipes. And it's Nanny's Cookbook. That type of ability to share experiences with people. Maybe you aren't the best at communicating with individuals. Maybe you struggle with some other issues with them. But if you can cook together, I think it finds it's a really fun way, or I find it's a fun way to get along and combine your creative energies with people. As a date, cooking with my potential girlfriend was one of my favorite litmus tests. If you could cook with somebody in the kitchen, it said a lot about how your potential relationship could be. If you're getting each other's way the whole time, if you're trying to stop what other person's doing, that's not a good sign. And I stopped many potential relationships right there because of it. Luckily, the partner I have now, she's amazing and we cook really well together. And it's really fun to experiment with food. One other method that I really enjoy is showing new kids how to cook. And I was involved in scouting quite often as a kid in Eagle Scout and going along those rounds. But if you could get kids out in the woods, you have very limited food options because you're trying to, especially backpacking, you're trying to be super light, yet some of these kids had never cooked before. And how many people had never cooked by the time they were 18? Anybody in here? Nobody. Good. But I ran into that all the time. You had these teenagers that had never cooked before. They were never allowed in the kitchen. And you got to let them experiment. And sometimes the food bubbled over into the campfire, which wasn't too good. Other times we surprised them with Tarzan steaks. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. You take a regular steak, you put it into the white hot coals that are at the base of a fire, and you flip it twice. And what it does is it creates this layer on the outside of the steak. And there's a Maillard reaction that happens between the surface level of the steak and the charcoal itself. And a Maillard reaction is what happens when you toast bread. That's what happens when you cook a steak. It turns and it crisps and chars that outer layer, and it allows for kind of a protective zone, and then heat can be transferred through to the rest of the meat, or a chunk of zucchini when you fry it. That's a Maillard reaction. So with it, we were able to do a Maillard reaction with these steaks, and we call them Tarzan steaks. You pull them out, you scrape off that outer little layer, and you have a perfect steak underneath. And all you needed was the steak itself and a campfire. Those types of really fun experiences were wonderful to be able to help teach kids that they can cook. Now, when you have food deserts, which is a big issue in our culture here in the US, you have the inability to get fresh food nearby. And so you have the corner market type thing, and that's the only place people can get food. I think a lot of the potential for creativity, the potential for life growth and life-saving elements are lost in these communities. And there's some really important food programs that are starting to happen, especially in the inner cities, where you have individuals that are growing and farming in these amazing different plots where they have Detroit, for example, LA for another example, where there is the open land and people are taking it over and cultivating it and then feeding neighborhoods with it. So where I'm getting with this is, I hope everybody here enjoys food. I know everybody has consumed food because you wouldn't be alive if you hadn't. If you enjoy the process and you have fun in the making of it, and then if you can help encourage people so that they can enjoy food, then maybe we can help eliminate these food deserts where people don't get the chance to cook their own food, and you can have a healthier, more sustainable culture. If there's land that can be potentially cultivated versus just sitting empty and vacant, that's a good way to feed a populace. And I'm all for natural spaces, that's great, but if you're in the middle of a city and you have a park that's destroyed, instead if you could turn that into a green space that feeds the community, that's a much better way to move forward. So overall, I'm kind of brainstorming with this speech, but food is essential, food is necessary, and our world is changing in a very, very rough way. So if we can't feed each other, then what can we do? So I encourage you, share a meal, experiment with a meal, and have fun with food. Mr. Toastmaster.